Hello everybody, I come to you this time from Munich, from the 2018 Munich Security Conference, which has taken place these last couple of days, Friday, Saturday, and today is Sunday. We're about to be done with the conference, and we're in the middle of a coffee break here in the Hof Hotel in Munich, and we just had Bibi Netanyahu address the crowds, and he basically spoke about Iran and how opposed he was to the current crafting of the Iran deal, and he also brought with him a piece of an Iranian drone that the Israeli Air Force had shot down, and actually challenged the Iranian foreign minister, who's about to speak actually. I'm going to have to run off very quickly to explain what that drone was doing flying over Israeli airspace. But the three fundamental conclusions for me from this conference have been: one, the centrality of Europe and European security and defense. Not a single European speaker failed to mention the importance of European integration, particularly within the EU framework on security and defense. That was also true of some of the American speakers that called for better European coordination in that space. So the German defense minister said this, the French defense minister Juncker said this. So this was central throughout the conference. The second interesting point was the dissonance between the Russian discourse and the American discourse. The Americans accusing the Russians of interference in their elections and hacking and trolling, just basically sort of outright trolling of American political life. Of course, there was mention of the indictment by the Justice Department of 13 Russian citizens, which happened at the end of last week. And the Russians, Lavrov and the communications minister, just outright denying these things, saying they didn't know what they were referring to these informations as blather, and saying that they really responded to internal American political disputes that had nothing to do with Russia. And lastly, my third point here is what has been missing. And there are two things. One is China. For a conference that is focused on global governance and the emerging architecture, so this central theme has been the collapse of the liberal order. It is interesting to see that we had the deputy foreign minister of China here, but that's the only Chinese rep that has come of a senior level. And China is going to be one of the architects of that new order, so it would have been very interesting to have, I think, more on China. The second thing that has been missing in my mind is emerging technologies and the world of tomorrow, security in the world of tomorrow. The Estonian president yesterday mentioned this. She said we should be discussing a lot more about AI and about cybersecurity and about these new realms, and less about the traditional, conventional sort of use of force kind of issues. But nobody picked that up in the panel, so it was just a mention that she mentioned this at the beginning, and that was that. There were a couple of panels on Friday evening on tech, and Eric Schmidt from Alphabet was on one of them, and he did mention a couple of issues that he thought were a threat to democracy. He mentioned that we were a few months away from having technology capable of basically implanting anybody's face on a video and an audio, and it would be very hard for us to be able to tell whether that was real or not, and that might be a real challenge for us to, in terms of news and communication. It might be a real source of fake news and others. But that was about it. So, China and technology I thought were missing. But in general, they were brilliant. And I have to run off because we have the Iranian foreign minister who is about to speak, and let's see what he says about the drone wing that Netanyahu produced. And anyway, it was great to talk to you, and it's been a great conference in Munich. So, bye-bye.